I'm Mara Webster with In Creative Company, and today I'm thrilled to be talking to the wonderful Varada Sethu all about Doctor Who. And one of the first things I was really interested in was you had worked with Russell T Davies previously on a production of Midsummer's Night Dream, and I was interested in kind of like how that really helped in terms of stepping into the world of Doctor Who and just the conversations that you and him were having about coming on board as one of the companions this series.
Yeah, well, the conversation about a companion didn't come till much later, obviously. But I think what was great working with Russell is I'm a huge fan of his work. I love his writing so much. And I loved the way that he kind of remixed the Shakespeare classic Midsummer Night's Dream, which we've all probably witnessed our own sort of stuffy version, and he was able to bring um such great energy and life to it. So I was um excited to see, how that translates to Doctor Who. And I think we'd stayed in touch after we did that. I would always let him know when I saw something of his that was brilliant. I mean, It's a Sin was so special. It was such a great show, and very English Scandal as well, which I watched like three times. I was always, staying in touch with him. I think it's really important to let people know when they've done something amazing. So then, yeah, it was I got called to come in to play Mundy Flynn, and that was so it was the first ever straight offer of my career that I didn't have to audition for. So that was so special to be able to to come into such a massive franchise without having to fight for it. Um, and it was because I'd worked with Russell before, and we'd I guess had a conversation in that sense. And then yeah, to be called back in, I didn't think it was possible. I was just saying, I didn't know there was a history prior to this that companions in the past have played a role in a previous season or an episode, and then they've come back as a companion. So I just thought it was a closed door. Oh, it meant so much to me.
And it's wonderful that I love hearing that actually that was kind of a surprise and not something you would have anticipated. But it's also so great because then in stepping into this season and having such an involved role, you've kind of had the opportunity to play in the sandbox a little bit and to kind of understand the tone in the world with, him back at the helm and working with Shooty. And so how did that one episode really help when you were developing Belinda as a character and kind of figuring out how she was going to fit into this world?
Yeah, I think the most important thing that it did for me was like me as a person, as an actor, because playing the companion is just such a massive undertaking. It's so full on. And with every new job when you start, you've got this feeling of being the new kid in the school. You're absolutely terrified. You think nobody will like you. You're going in with the stress of I don't know anyone, I don't know anything, I don't know how any of this works. But because I already kind of got those nerves out the way when I did Boom, it meant that I could hit the ground running when I came in. It was the perfect balance of having all the novelty of it still being, new and exciting as a new character. And, I get to take on every episode, a different planet, a different timeline, a different theme. But that I didn't have to worry about, whether I don't know whether I would click. It's such a warm, wonderful family environment, and I felt so welcome the first time round, and it was incredible to return to that family environment. It was wonderful.
And one of the things with Russell's writing, even just looking at that first episode with you, is there can be just a tiny one line that tells you so much about a character. So when she's gifted a certificate for a star and she's like, but why does it have to say Miss Belinda? Why does it need to say that? And that actually tells you a lot about her values, her upbringing, the way that her parents raised her, who she is in the world. And so I was interested in just how you went through the scripts and would find these tiny little details that actually could give you this whole worldview that you were building out for her.
Yeah. To be honest, I didn't get a lot of time to work on the script. I got given the script about 2 weeks before I had to come on set. So I think this is the character that I as a person feel the most vulnerable in releasing into the world, because it's the closest to me as a person. Because there was a lot of stuff that I just didn't have enough time in a way to layer Belinda. But what I think that's kind of the strength as well, because I had to just throw myself into it, and I took things from my life experience, but then also little sprinklings of exactly what you said about, her upbringing. What are the clues in this episode that give a hint to her family life, to what her value systems are, and what her value system is. And yeah, so I a lot of it was I filled in the blanks with my own stuff, more so than I've done with other characters in my life. But I learned about Belinda as the season went on, and with each episode there's a different layer that Belinda's also learning about herself, but I'm learning about Belinda. And I think as an actor, it's a really beautiful experience to go on a journey with a character and their evolution, and witnessing your own in your life.
Yeah, it's one of the gifts of episodic as well, because you got to spend so much time kind of developing her and living with her as well, I imagine. And even with what you were just describing about having to kind of, step in and find it along the way, that first episode, we get to see a couple of scenes play out, and then we suddenly jump forward several years. And so did something like that really help you, of even just getting to see her and kind of play her in these two different timelines?
Yes, yeah, that really helped. I mean, of course, yeah, to have a little insight into, and in the first draft, there was an even bigger flashback to, her being much younger. So it really helped a lot to see, how this character, I mean, she's obviously always been outspoken and always been, independent, and didn't want to be Mrs. Or Miss or Mrs. or anything like that. It's I'm Belinda. She has her own view of the world, and to see how that's evolved. And I think in the script, I think Russell literally said she's more hardened, which is what would happen when you work as a nurse. I think you witness so much trauma and hardship, and you have to toughen up. And I think that is her strength in the TARDIS as well. She's had to put up with I imagine, a lot of characters in her life, in her career. And I imagine you develop a very thick skin to people behaving in strange ways, and having a lot of compassion for that anyway, because she has to take care of everyone, and everything the way she carries herself in the world comes from a place of love and compassion.
It also feels like, off the back of what you were describing there, that also kind of is what really sets her up for being so great as a companion in the series, because the moment that she's yoinked outside of her house and taken in a rocket to another planet, she's bewildered by what's going on, but she kind of goes into more of a pragmatic mode. Like, okay, like, how am I going to get through this? How am I going to figure this out? What's going on? Okay, the neighbor saw this happen, tell my parents. So did you find that kind of gave you that essence of how she was going to respond to situations, which is she isn't someone to panic?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think for me, like me personally, I would have had a complete mental breakdown. But
Same.
for Belinda, it's like, I imagine, again, if you're in the A&E, she's like an A&E nurse. She's having to deal with making decisions under pressure in that moment, having the clarity of thought to, oh, okay, this is, all the problem solving. And in the TARDIS, I guess you don't, you're constantly endangered, being in any way linked to the Doctor. So it's I think that was her strength. I think it certainly lended itself, or it certainly gave me the idea of her being a lot more pragmatic about things
And with
than I would be.
And with what you mentioned before about, she really comes from a place of empathy in the way that she deals with people. It also kind of, as you go episode by episode, informs the way that she interacts with people when she first meets them, and obviously meets a lot of people and creatures in very strange circumstances and needs people to trust her very quickly. And so again, how did you kind of use that idea of, I'm used to having to connect with people when they're going through something traumatic and get them to trust me, really set up the way that you were stepping into each of these episodes and each of these new interactions for her.
Yeah, I mean, it was exactly as you said. Like that's the place that she came from. It's her job. That's how she makes a living. So you can't be you can't be confronting someone. You can't be you have to find a different angle to find the answer that you're looking for. And it comes from wanting to connect with someone. It comes from wanting to give them a feeling of trust. And she's a natural team player, because that's also what nurses have to do. And so the doctor and the nurse, great team. I can't believe they haven't done that before. But yeah, that's exactly, her career naturally lends herself to being a great team player, being a great companion.
And that team player element as well, the first episode, she's suddenly taken to this planet and told, like, you're our queen and this whole place is named after you. And for her reaction is very much, I'm definitely not, find
Yeah.
someone else, and I'm not that special. And when you kind of saw that, did that give you a really great idea of like her perspective of herself and kind of how she views herself in terms of the landscape of the world around her?
Yeah, I think it did. In fact, that was a really interesting point I looked into, because I don't think yeah, because she reacted in a very interesting way to saying, why me? Why me? Why am I'm not so special? Why have you brought me here? And I think for her, where she belongs, her purpose is in the life that she has at home, in service of helping other people. And without that, it's like she's kind of lost her sense of identity. But then she finds it in the field hospital, on the planet, not as a queen, but being the nurse on the ground. Um, and I think it's just this. It's a yearning to go back to what she knows, what she feels comfortable with her purpose. Yeah.
With what you were saying there as well, kind of made me think, like, do you think that she's someone who maybe has lost a little bit of her sense of self, just because when we meet her at the beginning, she's so fully immersed in her job? We see that she lives with flatmates, but they don't even get her name right, which tells us that she doesn't really get the chance to spend that much time with them. And do you think it was just her identity has kind of become so tied up in the work that she does that she's kind of left a little bit of herself behind?
Yeah, I think that's what it is. And I think so much of her sense of self comes from her place of work. So when she's taken out of it, she's having to question, I think, through the journey of being with the doctor, she does, I guess, have to question who she is outside of that. And she's left a bit of herself behind, for sure, that she wants to go back to. But she also grows into, she learns a lot about herself, a lot about the doctor, a lot about the world. Um, yeah.
And when she first meets the doctor, they obviously don't know each other at that point. She doesn't know who this person is, but she kind of goes on that gut instinct of, I feel like I can trust you. And, even without having full conversations, they have this kind of natural chemistry and back and forth with each other. And I just wanted to ask about what you felt like it was important to have and kind of capture in that first scene and that first interaction with Shooty.
Yeah, I thought it was really important to capture the groundedness of what it's like to be completely in something that feels so surreal, like your worst nightmare. And there's one person that seems to be making sense, but you have to put your life in this person's hands. And um yeah, I think the important thing for me was to capture the spark, um, that she feels with the doctor. The oh, there's something there. There's something that I need to follow my nose. This is someone who can save me. This is someone who might be able to take me home. This is someone who seems to see this world from a similar lens that I do, which is that it's ridiculous. Why has she been made the queen of this planet? But also seems to have all of this information about who she is. And is seems to be all powerful. He has a spaceship, so take her home. Yeah.
He also has such a specific way of speaking, and even when he introduces himself as the doctor, he doesn't ever really explain it to people. And I loved that her reaction was like, great, well, I'm the nurse, that works then.
Yeah.
And when you were going through the dialogue and the rapport that they start building at the beginning, did you find that really also helped to shape a lot of her sense of humor and just the way that they kind of comedically connect as well with each other?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, she's written that way. So even, when the robots come in and wreck the kitchen, and she's just like, my landlord's not a nice person. She's got to find the wit in, she's so quick-witted. She finds a sense of humor immediately in situations that are terrifying or totally uncertain. I guess probably part of her job. So, she's meeting this person for the first time and has to find a rapport immediately, and part of that is a sense of humor. Part of that is, okay, well, I have a comeback for everything that you say.
And you were saying before that obviously, you were learning this character along the way, and at the same time, you were working with Shooty for the first time in this way, episode by episode, and at the same time, your characters are getting to know each other. And so, did you find that all of those elements just really naturally played into the trajectory that Belinda's going on throughout the series for you?
Yeah, definitely. I think, I mean, obviously, I knew him from when we'd filmed Boom together, and that was great to, I mean, I completely, I was blown away by him as a performer, as a person. It's just, he brings out the best in me as an actor, I think. And I felt that I completely had trust in him as an actor, as a performer, as a person. And I think what I liked the most was we leaned on each other as characters, but also as people throughout our filming. And that was something that I think, that level of trust and love for each other deepened in the same way that it did for the Doctor and Belinda. It was really beautiful to kind of be experiencing it in real time, but also seeing that progress in the script.
And because you'd had that experience in filming that episode with Boom before, how did stepping back into this world and seeing everything that's crafted for Belinda's story just completely recontextualize everything that you had thought at the time when you filmed that for your character?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't know anything about Belinda at that time, obviously, but I think the when I filmed Boom, I didn't know anything about Belinda, but I think the way that it contextualized it was, it's just, this is so expansive, as a universe. It just went woof. And that was so exciting because Monday comes from a very specific time, a very specific planet, and then she stays there. But Belinda is taken out of what's familiar to her, and then put in a new environment, in a new situation, every single episode, every single journey that she's on with the Doctor. So it was just exciting. It's to explore all these genres and themes, and yeah.
And because you get to step into so many different worlds and even time periods in playing Belinda in the series, did you find along the way that she was someone who was fairly steadfast in terms of who she is? She's still learning those things about her, but the core of who she is stays the same quite a lot.
Yeah, I definitely got a sense for what her values are, what her motives are, and they all come from a place of love. It's all about caring for other people. She's very selfless. And that plays out in that's a theme, that's a the core of her that stays the same no matter what era or costume or whatever. It's I want to go home. I want to, my purpose is to help other people, and I found my niche in my world, and I want to go back to that. But then every situation she's in, she finds a way of fulfilling that purpose. So yeah, I guess in that sense, like the core sense of her stays the same.
And one of the things that's so great about the show is how practical so much of it is. There's so much that you're seeing on screen that's literally there when you're filming, and the production design, the props, the kind of costumes, the different like creatures and characters that come into it. How did that help you in terms of just really immersing into the world and kind of understanding each of these different setups and journeys that they go on really quickly?
Well, exactly what you just said. It did exactly that. I was so immersed in it. It's so easy to play opposite a giant robot when there's an actual giant robot in front of you, and you don't have to, act opposite a tennis ball on a stick. It's you can bring an energy that feels a lot more authentic. You don't. I feel like for me, I don't get drained as quickly because there's something right there in front of you. So it's exactly that, exactly what you said. Like it's just so immersive, and you totally believe that you are in that space.
And because there's obviously otherworldly elements and things that happen, there's also those moments where you have to kind of figure out, what does this performance look like and what would the effect be that's going to be added. In the first episode, without giving any spoilers away, there's a point where essentially you're holding a piece of paper, but something quite dramatic's happening. And so when you have scenes like that, how do you figure out, what does this need to look like? Because obviously we have to create a little bit of it, and something's going to be added, but we don't necessarily know what that's going to look like yet.
Yeah, you had that conversation with the director. So we had an amazing director who, well, in whatever episode, they were all amazing, but they because there's obviously stuff that can't play out in front of you. There's the practical element won't be there, so it'll be CGI or special effects added afterwards, and there might be a storyboard. So often before a block of filming, so 1 or 2 episodes, we'll have a discussion with the director and Russell, and they will talk us through like diagrams of what a certain monster might look like, of what the set or what the effect will be of the set, because the set might be, so for example, for the Interstellar Song Contest, which is in the trailer, there's it's supposed to be like a massive like a Eurovision contest. It's a huge stadium, but when we were filming it, you can only have something like 100 essays that are on the day going to be there. But then, we were able to talk to the director, who was able to map out, this is what the full image is going to look like. So you get a sense for, oh, when they're stood looking out at this audience, this is what they're seeing. They're seeing all of these lights and the spectacular show. So yeah, we would have a discussion pretty much prior to every single episode that was being filmed about all the technicalities. This is what it looks like on the day, and this is what it will be looking like, later down the line.
Yeah. And I feel like right from the get-go as well, Belinda really understands the stakes of what she's stepping into. She sees someone eradicated right in front of her. But again, kind of going back to her job, this isn't the first time that she'll have experienced that. But how do you feel like that really gave her an essence of, the real world danger that she's experiencing? And then as she continues on these journeys in the TARDIS, what that's going to look like for her?
Well, yeah, I mean, her job's, as you said, prepared her for it. So she's I guess has to make decisions very quickly in the moment in her job. She has to hold space for the trauma and for all of the loss and grieving, but also has to have a goal in mind and has to keep moving. So yeah, sorry, I don't actually know if I answered your question. I think that's what you're asking.
Yeah,
I don't know.
no, everything you said.
Yeah, her job plays
works.
into how she carries herself through through the season.
There's also these aspects there with the connection she has with the Doctor that it feels like they kind of very much have the same ethos. You know, there's a moment where the
Mhm.
Doctor is encouraging other people, you know, forgive and rebuild, and that's kind of the way that he looks at things. He's never someone who's like, oh, revenge is important. And did
Mhm.
you find that their kind of moral compasses started to feel very similar in terms of who they are as people and who they are as characters along the way?
Yes, yes. And that's what makes them such a great team. I think, as you said, they have a very similar ethos, and he also comes from, they're both very protective of people that they love and care about. They both have huge amounts of compassion for for everyone that they come across, in whatever state that they come across. Uh, and they're always moving from a place of love and compassion.
And when you got to set foot in the TARDIS for the first time, what was the experience of that like? Just having seen the iconography of what that is over the years as a fan of the show and Russell's work.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it's such an iconic moment. It was such a special moment. It took my breath away. I mean, the TARDIS is, it looks big on screen, and then when you're there in person, it's massive, and it's so beautiful, and it's yeah, it's an iconic moment.
I love that. Well, congratulations on everything. I'm so excited to see the rest of the
Thank
season with
you.
you, and thank you so much.
Thank you so much.